Hello and welcome back to the Bright Light Wellness YouTube channel and the Healing with Homeopathy Substack. Today I want to talk to you about another acute remedy. I mean, it's an awesome chronic remedy also, but I want to talk about it first acutely for flus, really. And this remedy is the remedy Gelsemium. Gelsemium is a really important flu remedy, so I think it's really important to share this time of year about when we should use it, why we should use it, and yeah, what Gelsemium is like. So first of all, gelsemium is a slow onset of symptoms. So you know how we talked about aconite and belladonna? It's like this quick, rapid, all of a sudden acute. Gelsemium is very slow kind of acting. So it's this slow onset of symptomology. Usually people are trembly, like their legs feels weak and trembly. And they're very, very chilly. They're very cold people. There's a very heaviness, especially in the eyes. They have a hard time keeping their eyes open. They feel droopy and heavy. Very droopy, heavy eyes. The body, the limbs will all feel very, very heavy, and they will be thirstless. They will not be thirsty. This is where you have to differentiate between pulsatilla, which is probably going to have a lot of cathar in a flu situation or cold situation. So they're going to have like more like conjunctivitis, like itchy. They're going to be warm. They're going to have like green snot. That's more pulsatilla. Green snot, pulsatilla often. A lot of crust around the eyes. They'll be thirstless also, but wanting cold things, where gelsemium is chilly and wants to be bundled up. Um, they can have shivers up and down the spine. This is a common symptom with gelsemium flus. Also a headache in the occiput, the back of the head, but then like shivers and chills up and down the spine. They'll be very tired, zombie-like. They are very, very weak in the flu state. Um, dizzy when turning their head in bed. They can feel very dizzy, so there can be vertigo. This remedy is also very good for never well since flu. So if you had a flu and you've not been well since the flu, gelsemium was one to think about. Um, so extreme weakness, shivers up and down the spine, heaviness, droopy eyes, thirstless. Um, Complaints can also start after bad news with gelsemium. Carb has this as well. Carcinosin doesn't do well with bad news. And by the way, gelsemium is a plant. It's yellow jasmine, so just so we are aware. And yeah, there can be a low-grade fever with this. Again, it will come on gradually, takes days to develop. They're better with rest, sweating. They're better with urination, actually, copious urination. In fact, they can have a headache that's ameliorated by copious urination. They're better with open air. They're worse with movement, thinking, and they're very much worse from anticipation. This is a very good remedy for anticipatory anxiety. That's more in the chronic state, but it can also be in the acute state if something there was some sort of anticipatory event before the flu, right? So they like were really worried and anticipating something, right? And then they got the flu. It could be correlated. The worse humid weather before a thunderstorm. Um, yeah, changing weather from like the changing of the weather from like the warm to the cold of winter. So again, that like changing into warm weather, so the spring could be bad as well. Any kind of change in seasons can bring it on. So when people get flus from the change of weather, a lot of times it's gelsemium. They also can be worse from like a fright or some sort of bad news, like we mentioned before, that can bring on this gelsemium state. Um, I just want to see if there's anything else. There likely will be diarrhea. There's a very long likelihood that there is diarrhea going on with this acute. That diarrhea could come from fright, from anticipation, like they have a public speaking event or some event that's coming up. They can have diarrhea from that or from bad news. They can have diarrhea with frequent urination. They can have lots of heart that feels like it stopped beating, causing him to jump up. Feels heart will stop unless he stays in motion, so they can feel like their heart's going to stop. The chills up and running up and down the back we mentioned. Trembling of the extremities, especially the legs from the slightest exertion. Um, yeah, heavy eyelids that are droopy. Okay, that's gelsemium in the acute stage. It's really good for acute flus and low-grade fevers. It could also be good for like headaches and migraines, dizzy, vertigo when turning in bed. Conium is also really good for vertigo turning in bed, but we'll talk about that at a different time. The headaches again start at the occiput and the neck and radiate into like the forehead, so they come like this way. They start here in the back of the neck and come up here. And they're helped by urination, which I mentioned before. and head could hardly be lifted. Like their head is so heavy that they can't even lift their head off the pillow. That's how sick they could be in a flu. So that's kind of the Gelsemium flu picture, acute picture. Now, in a Gelsemium chronic picture, they're very anxious people. So they can feel so anxious that their body will literally freeze. Mind goes blank before a big event. Your legs turn to jello before public speaking. Gelsemium is the remedy for fear that brings you to paralysis and agitation. Um, really mostly for anticipatory anxiety that leads to weakness, trembling, and dullness. So if you're having trembling before a public speaking event or anticipating a test or something, right? Like some big event, you have a lot of trembling and weakness, diarrhea, copious urination. This is a good remedy for that kind of picture. It's an anxiety remedy. It's not the panically restlessness of aconite or argentum nitricum, which I don't know if we did argentum nitricum, but I will. It's more like this emotional shutdown freeze of the flight freeze response, right? And they might be having the copious, urination and diarrhea and trembling and weakness. They really more of a freeze state. They feel dazed, heavy, slow, mentally, emotionally, and physically. They have fear of performing in public speaking, exams. It's a good remedy for fear of test anxiety. Being observed, like as a teacher, I used to have to be observed in class, right? If before I had to be observed by my principal, if I would have got copious urination and diarrhea and, trembling and weakness and freezing and shutting down, gelsemium is the remedy. Anticipation causes, like I said, the trembling, the diarrhea. Oh, dizziness is another symptom. Needing to urinate frequently, desire to be alone, aversion to talking, a strong need to avoid confrontation or attention. They don't want the attention. They don't want confrontation. The mind literally goes blank under pressure. They forget words. They become uncoordinated or they can't express themselves. A state of nervous exhaustion after mental excitement, grief, or shock. So, a grief, a shock, emotional excitement can just like have a total nervous exhaustion, wants to be alone, quiet, and darkness. So, they go inward. This is the freeze, and they're going inward. Um, I just can't cope. I want to hide and sleep, they might say. There's this trembling, weakness, heaviness, especially of the limbs and the eyelids. The eyelids are very droopy. I don't think I've never taken gelsemium, but I have some of these symptoms. One of them is sometimes I've had fatigue in the past that's been so bad that I just can't keep my eyes open and don't want to just want to leave my head back, which is kind of gelsemium for sure. Dull headaches that start in the occiput, remember, in the back that come to the front of the head or the forehead or the eyes, dizziness and blurred vision, worse from sudden motion or heat, chills running up and down the spine during the fever or before the fever, flu-like states with weakness, chills, and lack of thirst. The chronic gelsemium will be thirstless also. Neurological weakness after fear, shock, viral infection, or after the flu. After the flu, you could have a flu and then get stuck in this gelsemium state. Okay, so if never well since flu, you do want to consider gelsemium. Um, they're worse from emotional excitement, fear, anticipation, humidity, heat, bad news, better with fresh air, quiet, urination, and rest. Um, it's good for anticipatory anxiety, like I said many times before exam, interviews, performance, childbirth, travel, flu with fatigue and trembling, stage fright with diarrhea and weakness, vertigo and dizziness after a shock or fright, post-viral or influenza fatigue, where there's emotional dullness and heaviness. Um, you know, Gelsemium is really about like surrender that's gone too far, nervous system collapse. All homeopathic remedies work on the vital force, which is also the autonomic nervous system. They work on the autonomic nervous system. So the nervous system collapse under pressure instead of having strength, they have collapse, right? They don't have strength, they collapse under the pressure. It mirrors people who have been taught to suppress their fears and emotions, leading to freeze, disassociation rather than expression. And healing comes when they reconnect with their inner confidence, vitality, flow, energy through the body, replacing this paralysis with presence. Other remedies to consider in this situation of fear and panic is aconite, but aconite is going to be extremely thirsty with restlessness. They're in the fight mode, not the freeze mode. So they are panic, restless, and very thirsty. So it's easy to see that differentiation. Lycopodium also has a big stage fright situation. I did a video on Lycopodium recently, so check that one out. But they have this stage fright. It's really due to lack of confidence. That's really where Lycopodium's performance or anticipatory anxiety comes from. Um, Argento nitricum is also has anticipatory anxiety, but they will have fear with hurry and impulsive behavior. They're also in a fight mode. They will crave sweets like candy, and they will also crave sugar. And they will also be really super anxious about like crossing a bridge or flying on an airplane, but yet they'll jump out of an airplane. Like it makes no sense. They're just like they're they have a lot of fear and anxiety and they can hurry. They walk very quickly. They're always hurried, but they also have impulsive behavior where they'll just like impulsively do something. They're in a very much a fight mode. And Gelsemium is the fear with the weakness and the trembling and the collapse, the needing to be alone. They're in this freeze mode. So Gelsemium reminds us that fear doesn't always have to look dramatic. Sometimes it's a quiet collapse, the foggy mind, the heavy limbs. When we help the body release the freeze response, energy returns, confidence awakens, and the nervous system finally exhales. So that's Gelsemium. So let's think of it, first of all, in acutes. We want to use it for acute flus in the case where the person is thirstless, weak, trembling, chills up and down the spine, slow onset fever, occiput headache that comes to the front of the eyes. The eyes are droopy and heavy. They're so weak they can't even lift their head off the pillow. They're trembly. This is the flu state that you want to give Gelsemium in. Try a 30C repeated. They may have diarrhea also. You want to consider it when they're worse after the flu, right? If they go into this physical state that I mentioned before, after the flu, they just can't get over it. And you want to also consider it when the anticipatory anxiety is like taking over a person's life and they're in this collapse state. So I hope that's been helpful. I hope you learned a little bit more about the remedy Gelsemium. If you need to want to be equipped and be able to handle flus like influenza on your own without needing to seek medical care or intervention, I have a flu course that I've written. It's like a 1 or 2 hour webinar with an ebook teaching you how to treat influenza at home with homeopathy, because there are many remedies for flu besides Gelsemium. There's Nux vomica, there's Bryonia, there's Aconite, there's Gelsemium, of course, there's many more. There's Pulsatilla, there's calcarb, there's sulfur, like those can go on and on. So it's not always going to be Gelsemium, but Gelsemium is one of the top 5, I would say, for flu that you want to have. I would have a 30C in your home care kit at home in case needed. My husband has used Gelsemium for flu. That's worked very nicely, but he's definitely a Bryonia also in flu, which are both slow onset, but Bryonia is always going to be thirsty, very, very thirsty. Well, Gelsemium is thirstless. The main 2 thirstless remedies are Pulsatilla and Gelsemium in a flu. So you have to differentiate between those. Gelsemium wants to be alone, Pulsatilla wants your company and affection. There, see how we always have to know all of these ins and outs and pieces to help support us. And the mental emotional really is huge. Okay, I think I said everything I want to know. Oh, you could have insomnia or sleeplessness from anticipation or excitement with Gelsemium. Sleepy and weak during labor. I never even read that symptom before. See, I learned something new every time I read. Worse at 10 a.m. in the morning, sad but unable to cry, depression, fear of crowds falling and that the heart would stop. So many good ones. They are more quiet, timid, reserved people. Yeah, okay. I think that's good. I've said a lot. Hope that was helpful. Please join me on the Substack. Please follow along to learn more about how to use homeopathic remedies in your home. And please join the paid subscriber list. I'm always, posting a lot of information for paid subscribers right now on cell salts, miasms, and I'm definitely going to do other like remedies that are more obscure for them as well. And whatever you guys want to know more about, please tell me in the comments, because I am doing this for you, the people who are following me who want to learn about homeopathy. So, what questions do you have? What do you want to know? And if I have those questions, I can answer them here for you. That's part of what I'm doing here. So, I hope that's helpful. Thank you so much for being here. And if you're not on my Substack, please join over there as well because it's exclusive just for homeopathy if you're interested in learning more about homeopathy. All right. Have a good one. Talk to you soon. Thanks.